Hello and welcome to episode 152 of The Crate and Crowbar. My name is Chris Thurston. Today on the 2nd of August, I am joined by Philippa War.
Hello.
And Tom Senior.
Why hello?
Indeed. Why hello?
Why?
Why hello?
Why?
What a strange phrase that is.
It is strange.
Why hello?
Why?
Perhaps
Hello.
goodbye. Anyway.
Here we are.
Anyway, that notwithstanding, bit of housekeeping news before we start. I'm going to be away at the Dota 2 International in Seattle next week, which leaves us in an uncomfortable position of having everybody who knows how to do the podcast recordamadoo not in the country where the podcast traditionally happens. So for that reason, there's a pretty good chance we are not going to be able to do a podcast next week. So this one will have to do you for the time being. I think maybe if there's a way, then we'll try and figure something out. But yeah, it's normally in this scenario, Tom Francis would be able to step in, or Marsh, but they're dead now. Gone to the mythical place known as Sweden.
We could upload this one, but backwards next week.
That's true. It was this or a clip show and, or a bottle episode. And yeah, so apologies in advance for that. I'm already hotly anticipating the Discord chat that will occur immediately as people get to this bit in this podcast. But we're very sorry. It's hard, isn't it? What do you want from us? That notwithstanding, what have you guys been...
We've not withstood a lot, really, so far.
What do you mean? We
didn't withstand the hello. We haven't withstood the
Indeed.
next week's book.
It's already crumbling. In fact, I was trying to, transition to the next bit then, and that didn't even work.
Oh, sorry.
It's all gone to shit. But, that notwithstanding,
Oh, God.
what have you guys been playing? Pip.
Well, I've been playing Abzu.
Abzu. That's out to date, isn't it?
It is.
What's Abzu?
Abzu is absolutely under the sea.
As opposed to
Do you
mostly
feel like
under the sea.
that worked?
No.
Oh.
What does Abzu mean? Is that a word under the sea? Does it mean something?
It's actually, I think, from Sumerian mythology. I think it's the name for, like, the primordial sea from which life can spring and so forth, which maybe gives you some hints about what might actually happen in Abzu.
Yeah.
But yes, there's a hat over the U, the circumflex, but probably not one if it's from Sumerian rather than, although then it would have been in like cuneiform or something. So anyway, that notwithstanding, it's about, you play as a diver kind of exploring undersea environments, and the creative director of the studio that made it is the art director from Flower and, Journey. So there's a lot of shared DNA with Flower and with Journey. So, in fact, I'd say it's very, very similar in terms of like the trajectory that all three games follow. But yeah, so you're in this underwater world. There's lots of fish. There's lots of kelp and sort of things growing out of the sand beds and so on, which is pretty cool. And there's little bits that you can interact with. So you can sort of interact with these little, almost rock pool looking things, to introduce new species into a particular area. And you can also, find these they're like shark dog statues. That's the best way I can think to explain them. And what you do when you go near them is you use the interaction button, and it lets you start to meditate on top of the statue. So you your character sits cross-legged, but then you go into a kind of, not a free camera view, but it means that you're no longer in third person, so you can actually sort of, steer it from group of fish to group of fish or individual fish and have a proper look at them, or just watch them swim around and do their fish business. So, yeah, and there is a story that unfolds as you play, but it's one of those ones that as you might expect, given the studio's heritage, I guess. It's not ever particularly explicit in terms of, oh, this means this and this means this. It's more of a kind of, make of it what you will from the clues kind of, more ambiguous thing.
So this seems like, given your love for the sea and aquariums and fish and Subnautica and so on, this felt like, and even Flower and games like that, this felt like a shoe-in for Pip of the Year.
I thought I would be Pip of the Year.
Pip Game of the Year.
Oh.
Pip's favourite thing of the year. But when you first finished it, you didn't seem all that hot on it.
No.
Why is that?
Because, and I said this in the review I wrote, like, it gets in its own way so much. Like, you have a really nice, sort of sinuous, flowing movement system that it's quite easy to get turned around using, or, you know, you want to use that meditation mode to look at a particular fish, but it won't let you pick the fish that you want to look at. It, you know, you can sort of try and best guess it, but half the time I just ended up on completely the other side of the swimming cavern, looking at a completely different fish that I had absolutely no interest in. Like, it was obsessed with bicolor parrotfish. And I was not obsessed with bicolor parrotfish. I wanted to see a turtle. And then I wanted to see a barracuda. And the game and I were just not on the same page with any of this. And so I sort of ended up making angry noises as I tried to almost wrestle control of this camera just by sort of brute forcing it and shoving it from fish to fish to actually try and find the one that I wanted, which was probably the exact opposite of a meditative experience.
Why was it pushing you towards certain things, do you think? Or was it just a poor aiming system, or did it thematically want you to look at certain things in certain areas?
I don't know, because one of the things I would say is that Abzu has a very definite idea of not exactly what it wants you to do, but I think that the creators have it in mind that you will experience it in a very particular way and that you'll be entranced by particular views or particular things. And so it's built to encompass those things, but not have much flexibility for others. And so I got the impression that, for example, that meditation mode that I was talking about, it's so that you can look quite generally at the fish and sort of be wowed by unexpected behaviours or something as you watch them going about their business. Like, I was genuinely surprised when I was following a little anchovy and then it gets eaten by a black bass and you're like, oh, what? And then suddenly your camera just follows the black bass for a while as it sort of chomps on other fish. And that was really cool and really exciting and just awesome. But I think if you want to, if you see a thing go past and you go, oh, that's really cool, I want to look at that now, the game isn't very good at catering to that. And so I'm not sure whether it's poor tracking or poor navigation, but I am wondering whether it's actually more about they had it in mind that you would be content with just sort of wandering around and being surprised by things and sort of not having an experience that you were guiding particularly, but that you'd be happy to have to sort of be drifting, I guess.
That's interesting, because I was thinking of Journey, and Journey is basically just a giant funnel, where it's in this desert, and, you know, it feels like there's a wide open expanse, but you're always going into the next choke point.
Yeah.
And it is absolutely like that as well. I mean,
Yes.
It's in the ocean, so it's even more degrees of freedom.
No. If you try and leave the area, it turns you round.
Right, oh no.
Yeah, like I tried to sort of go outside the designated area in a kind of an abyss kind of an environment, and it just, your face starts making like a kind of a cone of light kind of radar thing that guides you back to the play space that you're allowed to be in.
Oh, I'm quite fascinated by the way that different games forcibly turn you around in different ways. Some of them flash up a little message for you, some of them just take control away from you completely and just turn you around, which sounds like this does.
Yeah, it does. And it took me a while to realize that was what it was doing, because because you can find these little drones in the atmosphere, in the areas, and activate them. And what they do is they follow you round kind of at your shoulders, and you can sort of press they really recommend you use a controller. So you use the B button, I think it is, to interact with things. And if you're just sort of swimming and you press that, you make a bleeping noise, and the drones kind of make a kind of response bleeping noise. But because the system it's never overtly explained, and so I never figured out across 2 playthroughs of this thing whether there was any meaning to the different cadences of their pitch. Oh, well, I mean, those are all the wrong words, but you know what I mean. You do music, you'll know the words, but, like they have, they'll make a high-pitched noise 1 minute and then a lower noise and then a chittering noise. And I wasn't sure whether that was just to add variety to your interactions with them, or whether I was supposed to be being able to read it to uncover some of the collectibles in the areas, or, any of that kind of thing. Like, I just couldn't work out sort of whether those things were actual guide noises or whether they were just there for flavour, and things like that. Ambiguity actually started to bother me after a while, because you're not sure if you're missing out on something, and the game is so, ambiguous and non-explainy, really, beyond the very basic controls, that it can be a bit, okay, I guess. Like, there's also, that noise that you get when you're near Nirnroot in Skyrim, that really high-pitched, like almost like someone's running their finger around the rim of a glass or something.
Yeah.
You get that noise at points, and I couldn't for the life of me work out if it meant something. And it's things like that just drive me crazy, because it's like, I can't interpret this properly, or I don't know if it's just something that I just leave alone and it doesn't mean anything. And so there were a few things like that. And then there are like wonderful moments where you feel like you're in an episode of Blue Planet, and it's ridiculously pretty and whatever else. But I mean, it does that thing that you were saying about Journey, and to an extent with Flower, where it, you are just following a path, really. You are being guided and you're being funneled towards a thing, and you're having that experience. And I think that in this, because you are encouraged to stop and look around and pause and sort of really, stay in an area, and then suddenly it'll decide that, oh, this is the part where you have to go fast, and you're now in a 2D plane, and that's just what we want to do because we want to show you this thing, or we're going to alter the viewpoint, or we're going to give you a vista, and now you can't go back. It's those kinds of things that are a bit intrusive. And I also think that, and this is a weird one, and I didn't mention it in the review because I still wasn't sure how to phrase it, and that's that, so because of the way they prefer to tell stories, it's very much a kind of, it's more like a ballet, or like a classical music recital, where you go through emotions, or you go through a sort of basic tone to tell the story and things. And I would say it follows a really similar mood trajectory to the previous games. And I didn't really know whether to criticize it for that, because to be honest, stories follow that trajectory all the time. Yeah. That's why that's a thing.
The mid-low point, and then
the triumphant sort of upsurge at the end, and all of that kind of thing. So it's not unknown. I think it's more that that's now their thing, and I've experienced it from them in 3 different ways now.
We've done the land one, the desert one, and the water one.
The lava one next. Yeah, I'm excited about that.
Yeah, so it's that everything's okay, oh, a bit threatening, really threatening, oh, a sentence, you know, so.
That, you just made it so no one needs to play any of those games now.
Yeah.
Is that a spoiler?
No.
Do you think?
No, that is, like, as you say, how stories work, and I don't know.
That's like all well, not all stories, but that's a lot
Yeah, no,
of
it's
stories.
typical stories, yeah.
It's not like Finnegan's Wake, but I mean, that's most stories then.
It's interesting to hear you describe it, because the great thing about Journey was that there were moments of spontaneity thanks to the multiplayer element of it.
Yeah,
where
really...
you did have like genuine kind of spontaneous interactions with people you met along the way. Is that in Abzu at all, or is there anything similar?
It's single player, it's totally single player. There's interaction moments that I think are intended to evoke particular things. I'm being deliberately vague, but they are really scripted, and if you've played one of their games before, or, you know, one of the team's games before, then it's, you can kind of see the signposting. So, and I guess that means that, like, I kind of don't really know where I am with it in some ways, because I had some really good experiences and then they were always interrupted by, oh, but now we're taking control back from you because we want you to see this thing from a particular angle, or, you know, we've moved you along and no, you can't go back. And so that sort of thing can get a bit, really?
I mean, was there any point to it being interactive? If you'd have just watched a beautiful kind of sequence, would that have been, you know, without that kind of promise of agency, would have been less irritating?
Well, I'll tell you what, when I played it the second time around, I'd definitely recalibrated my expectations of the game, and so I wasn't as irritated by some of the points where I couldn't take control of a thing. Because I knew that they were coming, and I kind of had mentally just gone, okay, and now is the time when, you know, I don't get to control this thing, or, you know, I've been shunted along to the next bit or whatever. And so that was a lot better in terms of being a bit more chilled, being a bit more sort of enjoyable. But I think that the other thing I would say is that I went and played Flower, the first, like, 3 levels, I guess you'd call them, just to sort of try and see if I could pinpoint what was making me uneasy about Abzu. And I think one of the things that Flower does better is, one, you're playing as the wind, really. And so even when you've picked up a whole load of petals, there isn't a character on screen in front of you obscuring things. And so you don't need to go into that meditative state if you want to look at something. You can just move the camera over, or, you know, like, enjoy that movement without feeling like you're once removed from something. So that was one of the things. And the other thing is that Flower is incredibly pared down, and so is Journey. Whereas Abzu kind of clobbers you in the face with fish, a lot. And so, shut up. And so you're going to this environment and there's just fish fucking everywhere, you know, like you don't get those, you don't get as much of that variation in terms of, like, there are some bits where, you know, it's quite sparse and there's a kind of transition point or whatever, but there's a lot of just all the fish are here and you can look at them all. And I guess I really liked the sparseness in the other games because it meant that it was easier to have those moments of wonder, because you saw like a splash of colour that you had never seen before, or you saw, you know, a particular thing that moved you around the map in a particular way. Like in Flower, you suddenly get windmills that will just, you know, shunt you along unexpectedly, and you get to sort of move really fast, and there's a kind of joy to that. Whereas I didn't really have many of those moments in Abzu, and I think it's because you can sort of see so much all of the time. There are those moments in some bits, like suddenly things will come to life or suddenly things will appear, and that's really cool, but I think And I think that there's a lot to be said for those things being on screen and having that sort of sheer mass of life. And there's some really cool things that they do with like the choreography of fish following you around and stuff like that, which is genuinely beautiful. And you get like little balls of fish that have been corralled by like marlin and stuff like that. And that's really cool. But yeah, like I don't know, it sort of didn't seem to quite be hitting the mark in terms of peaks and troughs, and it had this really uneasy relationship with you having control and then them wanting control to show you the game.
Right. Interesting. It's really interesting what you say about the colour palette, especially because Journey is really careful to, it just like love bombs you with colour at the end. And that's the most beautiful moment, the moment of elation. It's not just, it's a load of colours that just haven't been in the game before, but also just concepts like water and clouds and like a whole other physical entities that you're allowed suddenly access to at the end of this beautiful kind of explosion of life. And, it sounds like if they just love bomb you throughout, then that might be lost a little bit. Though actually I've one final side question, which is like in Flower, which I've not played, is there a turnaround you've gone out of the map because you're wind mechanic? And how does that work if you're wind?
I think it does buffer you. I really can't remember, and I think that's maybe says something about the fact that you can see that there isn't much out there, because you can see like these expanses of, just fields that clearly don't have stuff in them.
Right, okay.
And so I guess that I probably didn't try to go out of those. And then in other areas, it's very much that you're, streaming petals down a valley. And so, there are really high walls on either side. And so you're not gonna get out really. But I think Flower does a good job of sort of laying these waypoints, but making it so that they are the most appealing thing on the map and you do want to get to them. And you might wander a little bit to sort of see if there's anything else out there, but there's so much reward in adding those extra petals to the trail that is going behind you, and seeing the color and seeing and the noise that it makes when you activate one, and the blooming animation and all of that kind of stuff. And I think that's all very well balanced, beautifully balanced, that keeps you following those pathways.
Because they've got the scarf as well in Journey, which does the same thing. It gives you a kind of material incentive for collecting things. I guess if Abzu doesn't have that, then it might change things.
There are collectibles in there. You can collect these little Nautilus.
But does it give you a big dangly bit that gets bigger? Because that's just something you're feeling about that.
You see them collected at various points, and I think that they've hinted that you get something cool if you get all of them, or you see, or something happens, or whatever else. But there wasn't something that felt as directly rewarding as that, I would say. The soundtrack is superb though. It's Austin Wintory, so, and I think that is really lovely in the moments, even, like the scripted moments, even if I was kind of railing against them, the music was appropriate to what was going on. And it was, you can imagine it as an episode of Blue Planet, having those kind of swells, or the kind of particular sort of fade outs, or like the swells and whatever else. You can tell that I have absolutely no musical terminology at my disposal.
Ocean honks. Really impressive ocean honks.
And I think at first I wasn't really sure, because much as I really like it, I've also, it's a thing that is, I do it now, associate it with ocean games, like with Endless Ocean. There's a lovely soundtrack that sort of has, I think it's Hayley Westenra's, voice soaring over these lovely moments of surprise and delight under the waves. And there's the history of TV shows that use orchestral sounds in relation to sea programs and things like that. And so I guess in that way, and I don't really know how to say this without it sounding insulting, but like, in that way it didn't feel particularly innovative, if you see what I mean. And I don't know if that's because I don't have the musical knowledge to talk about it or to see the differences, or whether it was a briefing thing or whatever else. And I think it's probably just because I was feeling the repetition of motifs from the previous games in this one, that I was looking for a point of difference for things, if that makes sense, for something that would totally catch me off guard. And maybe that's the wrong way of thinking about it, because it had this beautiful synergy with what was going on screen, and it was totally appropriate. So I'm still sort of not quite sure where I am with that. And I would happily listen to it, you know, on its own and all of that stuff. Does that make sense? Does any of that make sense?
It sounded like it was somehow just too familiar to you in lots of different respects. Like, I mean, if you have watched a lot of Blue Planet and stuff, then like that stuff's fucking amazing, right?
It to memory.
Yeah. Like, just watching ocean shit is amazing.
Yeah.
So virtual ocean shit might not necessarily stack up.
Well, they also didn't really understand octopuses. Or not understand, but like, they have an octopus animation in the game, and the octopus is like hiding under a thing, and then it comes forward, and if you leave it alone, it'll sort of just sit there and whatever, and then you go near it and it withdraws or whatever. But like the fish cam, when you're meditating, it doesn't think that the octopus is a fish, so you can never look at it up close. And then so I just spent a while trying to like get the balancing right when I was in the third person diving view to look at this octopus, and then the animation just kind of wasn't as interesting. But, you know, and that feels like a mean thing to say, because I think Pixar has only just worked out how to octopus. Like they were saying that they couldn't have made the octopus in Finding Dory like a few years ago because technology and stuff. So I feel like this isn't a fair complaint. It's more about me and octopuses than anything else. But I was kind of like, why show me an octopus if you won't then show me an octopus? Like, don't tease.
It's, on that note, actually, the things you said about it feeling like derivative of a formula, you know, technically well executed, but part of a theme that you've seen several times now. It's kind of exactly how I think we both felt about Finding Dory. It's just, I mean, obviously the two things are only linked in that they are under the sea.
Yes.
But, you know, Pixar have definitely hit on an emotional trajectory and even a kind of plot trajectory that they replicate pretty exactly in a lot of their movies. And seeing it done okay means the new movie is quite unspectacular, whereas the same story has been spectacular in other contexts. And it's just a little bit of a difference in terms of execution. It sounds like this is a similar thing where Journey and Flower can both be great with those same beats, and maybe this highlights just some of the things, you know, they can bring out the same emotional journey again, but execution really does matter, it sounds like.
I think that's fair. I think we should have like talked to you about this, because that's a lot more succinct than I was capable of being.
Also, from talking to you about it, I haven't played it yet, but it is interesting to me that our relationship with the sea when it comes to games is basically New Age dolphin magic. This feels like it fits very fundamentally within the New Age dolphin magic school of what happens under the sea. Is that fair?
I was going to say, because of the Sumerian links, I would say probably like New Age is rather unfair.
Okay, well, yeah.
But I mean, there is that, you know, without wanting to spoil stuff, there is an element of otherworldliness and sort of mysticism and things that I think some people might not gel with.
I'm just thinking of Echo the Dolphin, really, which was another game that was fundamentally
Endless
about...
Ocean it went a bit magic dolphins.
Yeah.
Well, it went a lot magic dolphins. Yeah.
That's what I mean. It's just interesting to me that that's not that inventive, really, to go to the magical dolphin place.
Of, like massively terrifying VR under the sea experiences that I can't imagine you ever playing.
No.
Things like Narcosis and
that big whale one, what Valve done, shipped me right up. So it did.
The blue.
Yeah. I think. The one where a big whale is
Pip
there.
laughs at your sadness.
It's, it was lovely.
There's a word I discovered the other day, the word for being afraid of big objects under the sea. And I've now forgotten what that word is.
Wuss.
Christ, alright.
Well, look.
Trying to open up about things I'm afraid of.
No, I mean, I say this as somebody who can only just manage Stranger Things as a horror concept.
Yeah, you're saying this is somebody who's so easily startled that I have to shout from a room nearby if I'm going to come visit you.
Yeah. Well, anyway, and send me a G-chat in advance, just so I know. But yeah, what have you been playing, Tom?
I've been playing Quadrilateral Cowboy.
Oh.
At last. It's finally out.
Yeah, it suddenly just seemed to pop out of nowhere, didn't it? Like after many years of being teased. And there was a playable build around like years ago in the IGF that most of us probably had a go at.
And I think it did the rounds at various, like, festivals or various, like, showcases.
I think it was at Indiecade a couple of times in a row, actually.
Yeah.
So it's been around for ages, and it's it's essentially a puzzle game, a hacking puzzle game based around heists, made by Brendan Chung, aka Blendo Games, who did
Gravity
Bone and 30 Flights of Loving, and also Flotilla as a kind of side project. But this is far more like Gravity Bone and 30 Flights, in that he's using the Intech 2 engine, and he's got the classic kind of the boxy-headed characters, and the just really kind of lo-fi, but just wonderfully imaginatively realized near future kind of retro futuristic worlds. And Brendan Chung is incredible at creating evoking like very strange urban spaces and what's the word where like anachronistic, just very strange anachronistic urban spaces where at all times you have a portable vinyl player on you that you can activate just so that you can listen to music while you heist, and it will play hits from the 20s in a crackly kind of thing while you're hacking into stuff on your deck and opening doors and closing off lasers and kind of moving robots about. And that whole aspect of his universe throughout all three games, I absolutely love it, and it's superb. And unlike anything else, and it's almost worth doing Quadrilateral Cowboy for that. But what separates Quadrilateral Cowboy out from those previous two games is that it's much more of a game, in the sense that the previous two are very just narrative skits, basically. You just go through them, and you go through a series of scenes. There'll be an emotional journey there, and lots of kind of plot questions. Whereas this is about programming in a very basic way. So you've got this deck, and you can throw this deck on the floor, and it's basically like an old school laptop. And you can type in commands, you can hack into objects and type in commands. So you can type in like door.open and in brackets 3, and that will open the door you selected for 3 seconds. And then you can queue up commands. So you can say door 1 open 3, wait 5, laser 1 off 3. And what that will do, that will open the door, wait 5 seconds, and then switch off the laser. And that will allow you to kind of, once you've set all that up and executed it, pick up your laptop and you just kind of go through the door, walk down the corridor during the wait period, get through the laser at the other end, just as it kind of flicks off and then flicks back on again. And that's, you basically program your way through the levels in that sort of way. And that's quite difficult to explain in a review how that works. So that was an interesting bit to write. But this lets you set up kind of chain reactions of events that let you manipulate levels in occasionally very, very satisfying ways. So you'll set up a long chain of commands, and you might do something like, a laser will go off in front of you, you'll grab an object, you'll run back out just before the laser comes back on, the door in front of you will open at just the right time, a fan will propel you up 3 stories, then, if you've done it correctly, like the roof light will open at precisely the right moment for 3 seconds, and if it's longer than that, the alarm goes off. And if you do that, you get out, in and out, 20 seconds, and it'll time you, and it'll put you on a leaderboard with all your friends. And you feel like a heist god. You just feel like I have total command of the universe, and it's just incredibly, really empowering way to manipulate a level. But then it starts introducing like different gadgets. So beyond just simply hacking objects in the world, you get like a little dog robot, and again, you command that by giving it individual commands that you type out. So it'd be like, go 20, and it'll go for 20 units, and then turn 90, and it'll turn right 90, or minus 90, and it'll turn left 90. And this is where it starts to kind of stretch your patience where you're sending it to little tunnels, and you set up like a little monitor next to your laptop, and you see through its eyes, and so just kind of walking around the place, you are constantly typing in these commands, just like go forward, go right, go forward, go right, go left a bit, go forward a bit, no, you're stuck on the edge, go right a bit, and so on and so on. It takes a long time. Then it introduces another thing, like it'll introduce like jump pads, and then it'll introduce a really cool suitcase with a gun inside it that's like a turret that you can use to pop out. But when the gun pops out, again, you can use a monitor to see through the gun's perspective. But instead of just like aiming the gun with a mouse or something, you're again just going like right, so 70 degrees, up 70 degrees, left 70 degrees. And the whole game is about that level of just constant typing all the time. Just like constant relentless typing. And that might sound really annoying, but I really liked it. Because within the kind of context of the world, it's first of all, it makes sense. Secondly, it also introduces a necessary layer of complexity to make heists interesting, where the problem with heists is that they look amazing on screen when you have nothing to do with them and you're watching like cool, clever heist people do quips and do things like dangle off buildings into cool music. But if you boil down a heist to its fundamental components in a kind of gameplay sense, then you're just opening doors in a certain order and then going through the doors, which is boring. And what Quadrilateral Cowboy does is it complicates the process of opening doors and turns it into this whole much larger kind of skill set about manipulating these objects with a deck and with typing and with kind of DOS language and that kind of thing. And that is very successful. And it just about does enough to break that up with intermediary skits at the start of each level where you're kind of hanging out with your heist buddies, play badminton on a roof in the sunset, and there's a bit where you're repairing a flying boat that you've nicked and you're just kind of changing the oil and stuff like that. And it breaks up these moments of kind of quite intense typing with these really nice story sections where everything is so tactile in this world where you can pick up almost anything and throw it. All of the books have like different like bindings on them with kind of funny jokes. And if you go to one of your pals' like tiny little apartments and the people in this world live inside huge stacks of trucks, and inside the truck is like an apartment full of computers, and they live inside giant cylinders, and you can look up and you see like these flying ships going past. So there's this tremendous imagination at work behind all this, even though it's kind of rendered in a very lo-fi way. And as a kind of complete package, I think it's brilliant and it's really smart. Where it falls down though is as a puzzle game, its trajectory is very haphazard and not especially satisfying as a kind of complete experience. So the puzzle game thing is, the game teaches you the different tools you need to use, and it might give you a little arc of puzzles where it goes, oh, you've got this object, here's 3 missions that teaches you gradually how to use that object in increasingly complex ways. And Quadrilateral Cowboy does that with its various things. But the truly great moment in a puzzle game is when you've mastered all those things and you're using them in concert to complete the most advanced challenges. And Quadrilateral Cowboy does not do that. It goes off in a really weird tangent where you've got all your cool abilities, all your cool gadgets, you've got your little dog robot, you've got your bouncy pad, and then it suddenly says, oh, now you're 3 people and you're going to do missions like kind of simultaneously. You're going to switch between characters and carry out tasks to coordinate and get into a place. And one person can jump high, one person can go through small gaps, and someone else has a thing that can cut through doors. And you're going to do this for like 3 or 4 missions. And then it's completely different. You don't use many of the same gadgets. And at the end of that, there's a cutscene where it just rolls all of that stuff into an individual character again. And then you get one more mission and it's done. And it's like, it's just, it completely abandons its own, the momentum it had and all the kind of smart stuff it built up. It just kind of throws it all out and just goes, no, actually you don't really get to use any of that to its fullest potential. Like, it just needed like 3 or 4 master missions where you had to use everything at the same time. And there was there's one of those. The final mission is like that. And it's amazing. It's set in like a space station. It's really awesome and satisfying. But it's the structure of the game let down its tremendous potential. Like it could have been like a 94, like it could have been a huge scoring game. And, it's great. And I think I gave it 80 in the end, which is great by PC Gamer's logic. And I really wanted to give it more. Really wanted to, but it felt like it just denied me the true satisfaction that I felt I should have gotten out of those brilliant systems he'd built. But nonetheless, it's wonderfully enjoyable, and I love Brendan Chung's style and his brain, basically.
It sounds a bit like, so when I was a kid, I was in gym club, and there was this kid called Neil, and he wanted me to teach him how to do a particular thing. I think it was like a headstand off a thing. And he actually mastered it pretty quickly. And I was so annoyed that I'd lost my sense of power that I made it more complicated. And I kept making it more complicated just so that I would have more things to teach him and that he could feel like he'd mastered something. And like, that's kind of like, it sounds like almost like that perma tutorial of like,
Did feel like that, yeah.
You may not have mastered this. I'm gonna do a thing.
It's a good point though. It did honestly feel like a tutorial until the very last mission. And, tutorials are fun in puzzle games. Like the way Portal teaches you stuff is just inherently satisfying. But then you still get the crazy jumpy puzzles where you're kind of using all the tricks you've learned at the same time to actually master it. Then you get to win. Like, feels like you're in charge and you've actually kind of learned something. And that's the moment. It's the final exam. It doesn't give you your final exam properly, this game. And if it did, it would just be extraordinary. And I almost wish that there was, people could just make levels for it, because it has such a rich kind of toolbox it gives you that you could create some fucking extraordinary levels and have like your, turret gun shooting your dog robot off a track into a different bit, and just like really getting those systems interacting with each other in a way that the game doesn't necessarily give you. Nonetheless, there are some wonderful moments, like there's a bank raid where you're bouncing safes from building to building across vast gaps, and that's really, really funny. And you can fail in hilarious ways, like, because everything's so kind of analog, you always have to find a place to put your deck down. If there isn't a place, then you can't hack anything because you just can't put it anywhere. And there's a point in the bank raid where you go down some pipes and you have to kind of get get a little platform out. And I just dropped the deck into the abyss by accident. It just fell through the pipes. It just vanished into infinity. And I was just standing there. And the game doesn't fail you for it. It's got an instant restart function. I was just standing there like, can't do this. No way I could do this. I've dropped the only tool I have into the abyss. And there's just a hilarious moment of despair. And it's surprising how slapstick it can be as well. Cause it is very funny. It's got a really good sense of humour to it. I
can imagine that there might be a sense of humour in even just you getting your commands slightly wrong. Like, how does it handle that stuff? Like, are the fail states funny in and of themselves, or is it more just that you feel silly, but that's enjoyable?
Yeah, it is funny. And it is, you recognise your own stupidity when it happens. And frequently it's the problem I always run into with coding, where it's just, oh, that should have been a full stop or a comma rather than, you put the wrong piece of punctuation in and now the machine has done a stupid and you're locked in this vault forever. So, there's one where I took some lasers down. You have to go and steal a prototype, then run out. And I was like, oh, I've got this. I know that it takes me 2 seconds to get from the prototype to the door. So after that, the door's going to open. But because I put a comma in the door, comma, open, 3 command, the door just remained shut and the sequence ran to an error. So I bumped into it, and then they've got these turrets that come down from the ceiling and just kill you. And it's just like, the robot's designed to wipe out stupids like me who failed to type in things correctly. It's like, no, you get deleted now. Failed the Darwin test. It's great. It's so smart. I wish that, like, it does have that one failing. And that's the one thing that lets it down. But I've not really seen other people say that though. So I don't know let us know if you've had similar experience with it.
Why is it called Quadrilateral Cowboy? Are there any squares? Is there a cowboy?
Everyone has kind of big, boxy heads.
Okay.
So they're kind of sort of quadrilateral from a very 2D, like if you look at them right on, they're quadrilateral.
Are any of them cowboys?
They kind of are actually. They're awesome. Like the people you play are really cool. And because you get to see inside all their apartments, you get to see what they're like. They're actually, because you can zoom in, onto anything, and there are just little jokes everywhere. So you've got the woman in the glasses, and she likes reading kind of trashy, detective novels. And, there's one where it's just a picture of like a woman screaming in a car with a man driving. And, I can't remember what the tagline of the book was, but something like, he smelled her fear. It's really, loads of stuff like that in it that is worth hunting out, seeking out. The other funny thing about Quadrilateral Cowboy reviewing it was that the only other person in the world on the leaderboards, on the scoreboards, was Tom Francis.
Oh, God.
I know.
How annoying.
Because I think, he probably, had some early builds of it, and maybe he was the only person who played it in Europe. So all of my times were competing against Tom Francis's times. I just saw pentastacked on all the leaderboards. Like, he was the only one. And then I was like, oh no, I did that twice as slowly, so I did them again, so I beat his time. Just because we were the only two people on the leaderboards, and that was just like a basic level of gotta beat Tom Francis, gotta do it.
That is literally an achievement in Gunpoint. Really? Beating all of Tom's times.
Really?
Yeah, no, that genuinely is an achievement.
Well, hopefully I have that.
So what I'm saying is Tom welcomes you for beating him at hacking.
Then halfway through, like, towards the end of the review period, like there were 2 days left before embargo, I was just finishing up and grabbing screenshots. And I noticed that a third player had joined the leaderboard. And it was fucking Graham.
I know, right?
It was Graham. I was like, holy shit. Why are the only people in the world on this leaderboard?
All just creating crowbar. Yeah, exactly.
So it was made for us in that respect. It was a strange, but,
who's
I loved it.
in the lead, like, in terms of the person with the highest scores, or the most highest scores?
The last, when I left it, I was in the lead. But I wouldn't have put it past Tom or Graham to have easily surpassed them.
Tom's been away. Maybe he's been playing it in
and
studio.
Graham's too busy enjoying new beaches.
Yeah, it's a beautiful life.
Awful.
What I'm saying, Graham, is come and get me in Quadrilateral Cowboy. Bump me off the top spot. You too, Francis. There's going to be a reckoning when you get back.
Oh, I'm jealous now. I kept seeing pictures and kept wanting it to be the sort of game that I like. But I hate hacking games. I hate anything that seems like it's trying to teach you coding. Something in my brain just goes, no, I will not learn this useful skill. God, I'm leaving. I'm gonna go and watch more Blue Planet, you know? Like, there's something in me that develops this massive sense of panic as soon as it's a case of needing to learn how to open a door, but using typing.
Instead of just opening the door.
Well, exactly. But I mean, also, I think it's just logic and it makes sense and it's fine. It's just I don't find it enjoyable, and so I'm like, you can't make me. But,
It is annoying, especially in like anti-grav levels where if there's no gravity about, you put down your deck and it just floats there. And you zoom in, start typing things, and it's slowly rotating on your screen as you're trying to type out code. Which is hilarious.
Sick.
Again, it's really funny. But it's just adding this extra layer of annoyance to it. But there was something really tactile about it. Typing directly into the game like that was really nice. I really enjoyed that.
Oh, that sounds really cool.
No, it's nice. It is good.
That was apparently the IGF versions as well, like the placing your second screen down, the tactility of it, like you've got this backpack full of gear.
That second screen thing was, it's really cool that you place it separately, but that was the fucking most annoying thing about the entire game, to be honest, was that you could put it down slightly in the wrong place, and you need to be able to see what you're typing and what the robot is seeing at the same time a lot of the time. And it's just, oh no, I've got to pick it back up and put it back down again. But I respect that commitment to...
I do like the idea that someone might be walking around with a hulking great gramophone on their back as well.
Yeah. It's great as well.
I mean, you know, in the real world, that would probably be some awful mustachioed hipster man from East London, like deciding that was the new thing, like walking down, I don't know, what's it called, road. And that's the one, like Dalston Junction kind of area where all of the haircuts live. And yeah, just sort of the horn of the gramophone just like poking out like from a tweed jacket. Maybe I shouldn't have spent so much time being angry on that road.
No. It would be a very, very Nathan Barley thing if it wasn't Brendan Chung.
He pulls it off. He does pull it off. ramen bars in the rain and kind of futuristic
No, I like the
Blade
sound
Runner
of
universes. Yeah, it's really cool. I want to be in his film. Just walk around his sets, it's just, the places he assembles are just fantastic, and I'll always play anything he makes, I think.
Yeah, I think that's what I want. Like, I don't want, and obviously this is like being a dick about the premise of the game, because it's like you can't just say you want the one thing and not the other, but I'd really love to see it and to play with it without
30
having
flights,
to do
Pip,
the
if you never
other
have.
thing. I haven't.
You should play 30 Flights of Gravity Bone then, because it is.
Yeah.
I
this,
will do that.
But without the game, which is,
Yeah.
well, I mean, there's a game. I mean,
Yeah, it's
don't want to
interactive.
wander into that territory, but they are linear narrative experiences.
And
Journeys,
I'll wear
if
my
you will.
own cowboy hat.
Sweet. Chris, what have you been playing?
So I've dipped back into virtual reality, today actually. So I want to talk a little bit about raw data again, which I mentioned on a previous podcast. When I played it previously, because I bought it actually, I didn't get much out of it and didn't go back to it because the Vive we were using, is shit and has a dodgy base station, and as we've said before on the podcast, makes you be sideways sometimes, which is the worst thing imaginable. And also makes everything feel worse, basically. Like, every interaction feels worse when you lose track of your hands. It doesn't feel great. Now I've set up the, one of the PC Gamer Office Vives, for the week for work reasons in this very room. And
It's
it works.
watching us now.
It is watching us now. And, it works beautifully. So,
It's reporting your compliments back to Valve right now.
thanks, Gabe. Thanks, Eric.
You suck, Valve. I just flipped the bird at the PlayStation there.
Not
really.
you, Chet. Nothing for you.
No, you're cool, Valve.
Anyway, so, and last time I said praise raw data for its potential, it's a cyberpunk wave survival action game that you guys have both seen me play. And honest to God, the experience I had with it previously was a teaser of how fucking rad, but deeply embarrassing that game is. So, to get people up to speed if they didn't listen to the previous episode, it's a cyberpunk game set in, like, you're a kind of cool neuromancer kind of cyber warrior loading into corporate databases to steal stuff. But this basically means entering this arena full of robo tubes that spew security bots at you.
Yeah.
As one of two characters currently. It's in early access and there's going to be more. And you're either a guy with a gun or a ninja with a, like, lightsaber katana. And
The only choice I need.
yeah. And it's, in that sense, it's not actually miles dissimilar to a bunch of other VR, experiences. Like, it has the deflecting bullets back at people with a sword thing that's in the Star Wars stuff. It has firing a gun at stuff in 3D space, like Space Pirate Trainer and things like that. But of all of them, it's the one that commits the most to embodying you in that experience. So you don't just have, guns strapped to your hands. You're the controllers, the grips on the controllers and everything else and the triggers, all of that represents what your hands in the game are doing, and it makes an attempt to animate your actual hands.
Yeah.
It's crude, but if you squeeze the grips on the side of the controllers, you clench your fists.
Do you have arms? They're not floating.
Yeah, you
right?
have arms. Yeah, you have basically down to the elbow, like just past the elbow,
Yeah,
which is about as far as it can tell.
Yeah.
But also it's multiplayer, so you can see other people walk around, like
sweet.
you can see each other.
So you kind of have washing up gloves, almost. Like that amount of arm.
Yeah, or just, forearms.
Oh, yeah, that's another way of talking about it.
And your right arm has, I think, actually you can set your dominant hand. So for me, it's right hand. I think it's meant to be offhand, cause I'm a lefty. It has like a teleporter device on it, and you sort of squeeze that hand and you can kind of throw yourself to spots on the ground, and you can run around in the rectangular or square space you've got, marked out as your Vive play area. But if you want to move across the level, you've got to teleport. That's also part of the game. Like, being able to teleport is part of your power set.
Yeah.
Which is a good way to reconcile the limitations, the physical limitations of VR with the needs of the game. It's mega simple in terms of like fighting robots, but there are more types of enemies. So robots with rifles and invisible bots that come at you, and that's genuinely quite scary. Like when you see the shimmer and something's behind you, and the need to kind of to be aware of your position in 3D space, because robots can come out of any of the tubes and sneak up on you and stuff, and they're quite quiet. So you kind of use teleportation to get to different vantage points that are likely to be safe and so on.
How are you okay with this and not okay with big sea creatures? Like, this sounds terrifying.
Because I don't know. No, big sea creatures have an element of like the sublime to them. They're like these massive monoliths under the sea. They're unfathomable, literally.
You couldn't defeat them with a katana.
Exactly. Whereas this is just a little robot and they can kill it. But anyway, so the way your weapons work is fucking brilliant. So they start holstered. So your sword is on your back, above, on whichever your dominant shoulder is, I guess. And that's the sort of physical object that's consistent with where it is. Gun is on your hip, and if you have the pistol, you have a clip, like an ammunition clip, reserve on your other hip. And you grab things using the grip on the pad. So you put your hand up, down to your hip, and you press the grip button, and you have the gun in that hand, and you can put it back by putting it back there and gripping again. You can change the settings for that, so you have to grip constantly to hold something, which is more realistic, or so that you can just sort of have it be sticky or whatever.
Yeah.
But that interaction is consistent, and this is really important to the way the game feels. So if you reach across yourself with your other hand, you can grab it with that hand, and you can pass things from hand to hand, and you can, you reload the gun by reaching and grabbing a clip from your hip and slamming it into the bottom of the gun. And that feels very quickly incredibly natural, to the point where, you're shooting over cover one-handed, and then you need to maybe fire the other way around the cover and reload. So you pass the gun to your other hand, then you reach down to grab the clip, and then you fire your shot while also slamming it into the thing. And then eventually you're chaining that together with teleporting at the same time. So you like one-handed fire a clip off into a robot, and then as it nears you, if you haven't killed it yet, Pip, you're right.
There's a wine blackberry up my nose.
You're right, Pip.
Sorry.
You inhaled a wine blackberry.
Only a bit of one. It's fine.
You're right.
Carry on. Yeah.
Okay.
It just stings a bit.
Oh, sweetie.
Pip's having a citrus experience.
Oh, God. Oh, dear. And it feels like just fucking great. And there's loads of things I figured out you can do now. So part of it is like, if you teleport around with the pistol, you feel like, is it Equilibrium, the movie with like gun fu in it?
Yeah.
It feels a lot
Christian
like,
Bale, yeah.
It feels a lot like that. Like, it obviously doesn't teleport, but you're kind of constantly dashing, and like, you'll like dash up to a robot, shoot it in the head, and then like dash through it and like spin around and like fire backwards over your shoulder at a different robot, and then crouch and slam another clip into the gun. Like, you feel like a fucking badass, and it's seamless enough that you become not so aware of the limitations of VR.
Interesting.
And the sword stuff, you can also punch, like if you're not holding a weapon, you can punch things and things, but the melee is a little bit more hit and miss because it can struggle to locate you, but I find it a lot more consistent now with the working Vive, which helps a lot. But you can do things like, I didn't realize you can throw the katana like a boomerang, and it always returns to you, and that is really cool.
That
like you'll like, I don't know, sword two people at close range, and then you'll see another one kind of like lean up over cover with they're like crash test dummies. They're kind of really tactile to kill as well.
Yeah. With
a rifle, and you like fling the sword at it, and then as it crunches through it, you teleport behind another robot and then like pull the sword back through that one. It's genuinely great. Like that's what VR is for. And this is the first, outside of something like Elite Dangerous, which is just a game that naturally works very well with VR. This is the first time I've gone like, man, I want to go back in. I want to play a lot of this. Not just the traditional VR thing, which is, I get this and I get why it's cool. This is legitimately, Pippi, you're right.
Yeah, fine. Just carry on.
You rolled 2 1s on drinking that wine, didn't you?
To explain, in case you don't cut this, I tried to cool my wine down using some frozen blackberries, which have now disintegrated into the wine, leaving balls of blackberry bit floating around, and then I kind of hiccuped while drinking, and then a piece of wine-infested blackberry is now inside my nose and stings, and I'm not having a good time with them.
Oh,
I was
God.
trying to keep it on the down low, but apparently I just look awful. Yeah. Ow. Anyway, saying.
so that brings me to the reason that I've set up the Vive, which is for the other really impressive. Tom, stop giving the ups to the Vive. It's rude.
All right.
It's just looking at you forever.
Hang on,
with a million lasers. Yeah,
judging me. With the
raw data.
Yes, I was going to call it budget cuts. That's wrong. Is there any way for you to export these plays, like these cool things that happen? Like, does it have any way for you to
That'd be good.
show that?
I need to figure that out, actually. I think you'd need to just fraps it like normal.
Yeah.
I might do, actually, because I'd be quite curious to see what it looks like. Because, I mean, don't get me wrong. I think if you were watching someone do it, they would look like most things in VR, like the world's biggest bellend. But I think if you actually watch the game perspective, it would look really cool. Because it looks like an FPS, but like an impossible FPS where your arms actually do the things that your arms do. And you hold the gun at the height you actually would, whereas FPS protagonists hold their gun very close to their faces, but also very low. So, you know, the things that become natural so quickly, like just moving the gun out of the way when you're not, you know, using it, holding it down and then raising it to shoot somebody, like that kind of thing. Like, I might record a little GIF or something later just to kind of illustrate what it feels like to play, because it is.
Yeah. Like, it would just be interesting if it had like almost like a cinematic mode that you could sort of tell it, this moment I looked amazing.
Yeah. I mean, I think VR could really do with better and more robust like capture tools anyway. Yeah. So that brings me to, the reason that I started off on this particular VR experiment, which is, for Dota. And so I am going to talk about Dota for a bit, but this is genuinely new and mad and spectacular and probably the silliest, maddest and most impressive implementation of virtual reality into a traditional game that anyone has done so far, I think. Particularly when you're talking about types of games that don't suit VR. Obviously, like I mentioned Delete earlier and Star Citizen, games like that, of course they're natural fits. When you're talking about like what does VR bring to games more broadly, particularly like, you know, to Dota, I didn't think they would commit this hard to it. And weirdly, like March last year, I wrote a 3-lane highway column, which was a joke about what Dota in VR could be like. And they've made it. I'm not saying they're based on what I wrote, but it's eerily similar to a mad extent. So it's called the Dota VR Hub. And when you load in, you're sort of standing in the Radiant base, basically, and you have a big menu and very basic feature. And they probably could have left it at this. And and it's probably where a lot of games will get to in terms of VR implementation, is you can load up a hero viewer and just walk around the characters, like load them up in life size. And
that's cool.
Say hello. And they're wearing your cosmetics. And there's a big menu and you can swap out the cosmetics, which is a feature I recently wrote about, which is like trying on cosmetics in VR. So you can go like, wow, that looks rad, and like rotate the characters and they're like life size or slightly taller. Some of the characters feel life size and some of them like, wow, you're tall. Like,
yeah, Enigma's enormous.
Oh, sweetie.
Oh, that was probably the worst hero that I could have said that about. But like, he actually towers above you when you're looking, whereas Venomancer, I loaded him up because my favourite. He's more kind of eye to eye kind of thing.
Pudge is quite short.
When I played it actually, or when I was playing with it, it was the first day that it was out though, and so the servers were absolutely just falling over. Like, half of it wasn't working properly, and they didn't have the ability for you to sort of select your cosmetics from inside that thing. Like, if the servers were up, it would show you the current loadout that you had, but it wouldn't let you change that. And when the servers were down, it would just show you the default hero model. Yeah,
it's a lot better now. There's some really cool things, like Crystal Maiden's Arcana dog, which is, there's a cosmetic that gives her a dog. It's massive.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's like a huge Burmese mountain dog. It's supposed to be a puppy, but yeah, so there's some weirdness.
How's the armadillo?
I haven't seen the armadillo.
Well, that breed mother is actually
she's terrifying.
Horrifying.
She's like horse-sized. Like a horse-sized tarantula.
God.
So don't do that if you're afraid of spiders. But, right. So that's good. That's fine. Lots of games could do a model viewer in VR where you go and look at a level or something like that. That's fine. The bit where it gets fucking mad is the spectator tool. And so they teased this earlier in the year, and you load into a game and it's a proper lobby. It's And you load in and you can have a private one, or you can just join anyone to watch a game. And I watched the first game of the International. It's ongoing at the moment as we record this, but the first game of the International wildcard. And you load in and you're standing in this massive, it's sort of like the Dota high fantasy equivalent of an outdoor cinema. Like there's a starlit sky above you and a huge screen, which is broadcasting the game as the live stream would. And in front of you is a massive plinth with the minimap on it. So you stand before it, and it's like in front of you, and that's dynamic and happening. Look down and see the minimap. And then either side of you flanking the screen are each team's heroes, life size. And below them is like a floating panel which shows the current inventory. And as they do skills and abilities and get killed and so on, that's reflected in the characters to either side. And obviously that's a little bit impractical, like having to walk over to see how someone's doing rather than bring up a menu. But you also have like giant floating golden experience graphs and stuff. But the other thing is it's multiplayer, so you see other people in that room with you.
Oh, wow.
And everyone picks a head for themselves, and there's loads of pro players, characters, and so on. Yeah. Everyone's represented as a floating head and their live paddles. And it's amazing how expressive you can be with just a big head that you can see where it's pointing and some paddles that are floating in space. You can wave to people, you can dance, you can imply that you're doing a hip thrust, which I've seen quite a lot of.
Yeah.
But these are just people, and you can also hear each other talking. Like, you can switch it off, but you can just hear people's voices, like, as they talk about the game and their friends and stuff.
Wow.
Also, if they've left their sort of broadcast channels open, you can hear them, like, you can hear the match echoing, and that is infuriating.
I didn't find that at all when I used it, but that'd be down to individuals.
Yeah, like, I just I think I lucked out, in, out. No, wait. Whatever the one that means that you didn't have luck.
You looked wrong.
So yes. I'm tiptoeing around how mad this gets. So that's the thing, right? You can watch the spectator game. That's the most practical way to watch the game in VR. You can sit on the floor if you like and just look up at the big screen, and it's like watching on a cinema screen, right? Like VR's done that before, like VR cinemas and things. However, you go up to the mini map and you can look down on it. You can point at an area of the map and pull the trigger, and then you're there in the game. In VR.
Holy shit.
And you can scale yourself up and down. So you can stride over the map as a giant and look down and see the team fight happening around your feet.
That's awesome.
In the forest. Or you can shrink yourself down to life size, to the size of a creep, and stand in a creep wave and watch people fight around you.
That's amazing.
And like, this is like, I literally wrote this as a joke last year.
Yeah.
Like you can do this, any game of Dota is being played. You can watch replays, you can, and you can, and you still hear the commentary, and you can still hear people talking, and you can still see other players like wandering around and like hanging out. And like earlier, honestly, it's hard not to just be like laughing. Like most people I could hear were laughing because it's so silly.
Yeah.
And like there was a moment where I think one team was pushing the first tower to fall of the game, and everyone was just hanging around watching it. And some people were big watching it below them, and some people were like little watching it from the side. And I was like hanging around at the side, and everyone's like waving their things in the air, cheering. And it's like, and then the tower falls, and I was like, yeah, and one guy's doing some crotch thrusts, and someone's dancing.
Wow.
And then like one of the players playing character Morphling is like a water elemental, came like rushing towards me and rushing past me. I generally like started back because he was like life size, and it's just like, whoa, shit. And like later on I watched someone get ganked from a bush, and I was just hiding in a bush, like peeking out, watching this happen. It's nuts. Like, it's basically a really impractical way of watching the game. It's quite hard to follow. They've done some really clever things. There's a button which is called like directed view, and it takes you to something that's happening.
Yeah.
And you can jump back out to basically the lobby view at any time and look down at the minimap and go, okay, something's happening over there. I'll dive back in over there. Or simply just zoom out so far that you can see the entire map, and you can kind of like point where you want to go and teleport over there. It uses the same teleportation system as most Vive games.
Yeah.
But it's such a strange paradigm shift for spectating games because, it's not practical. Like, Dota is really designed to be watched from the perspective that it's designed to be watched from. And even if they added something like this to Counter-Strike, I think you're better off watching it from the perspective of players because that's where the skill is visible. But it makes it a spectator sport in a way that it hasn't been. Because, I've watched Dota online with Twitch chat, and I've watched Dota online with my friends, and I've been to many, live events and watched it in that context. But this is an entirely new way of watching it, where you're stood down on the map inside the game with a bunch of other people who are hanging around. And it's just, you don't have to play it multiplayer. You can make a private lobby and just have it be you and still watch the same games. And you hear people's chatter and stuff, and you can just wave to people and they wave back. And it's surreal. And there's this strange sense that the players don't know that they are surrounded in some way by like invisible presences
Giants
that are watching them.
Yeah.
Like, and I know that's not really materially changed what they're doing at all, but it feels futuristic in some strange way that, you know, in a hotel, in a hotel in Seattle where the group stages are being played, there are a bunch of, you know, Dota pros sat at computers playing a game. And that is being broadcast on the internet, and that I can kind of get my head around. But the fact that somehow inside the game are also these, like, specters floating around, watching, making jokes, laughing, kind of from inside the software is one of the weirdly most sort of cyberpunk things I can think of. Because when people were imagining how the internet would work in the future, there's that seemingly sort of anachronistic idea that you would be inside it, you would be embodied in it. You're not just going to browse it on a screen. And subsequently what we've realized is browsing it on a screen is just better than every other way of doing things. And similarly with this, like if you actually wanted to seriously follow the game, I might use the lobby view with the big screen, but I don't know how useful it's going to be as an actual spectator tool.
Is there a problem with the resolution when it comes to, there's a lot of fine detail when it comes to reading stats off surfaces and that kind of thing, that the Vive doesn't seem
it's good enough.
amazing at.
Like, I mean, they've gotten quite good at, I certainly don't notice. I think everything's scaled up quite dramatically, but you don't necessarily tell. Also that you can move yourself closer to things.
Yeah.
I miss the data presentation in the lobby. Like, I miss being able to sort of see cooldowns, and I miss being able to see, like, you know, the information in the places that I'm used to seeing it. And also I just really struggle to watch things in VR. I'm not very good with, like, it gives me a headache. To be fair, looking at screens for a long time gives me a headache, but I really struggle with being in VR. And I don't know how much of that was the misfiring base station and the fact that it was, you know, like, you were permanently on the lookout for the world slipping sideways. But I found that it wasn't an experience where I emerged with anything less than a tired eye headache.
See, I don't get sick or headaches from VR at all, and I found it, like, not problematic in whatsoever, but I guess I'm quite lucky.
I mean, I get them from regular screens anyway, even when I'm wearing my glasses, so.
Yeah, no, fair enough.
But yeah.
So yeah, like, it's, you know, it's mad in a way because, I mean, actually the reason I thought they would never do it is because VR is such a luxury product, and part of Dota's strength for Valve is that it runs on everything, and it's popular in parts of the world that I would imagine we're going to be very slow to pick up on VR, just for technological and economic reasons. And so doing this thing, like, they definitely didn't need to do it, but it is wonderful that they have. Like, if there's something to be said for the way that game is developed and the complete lack of common sense when it comes to what Valve builds and when sometimes, like, you know, the game, everyone's excited about the first new hero in about 8 months, but if you want to climb inside the game and live in a bush, you can do that now. Like,
sorry.
I was going to say it's a conflation of, so Valve's whole thing is people work on what they kind of want to work on as long as it's considered useful by their peers. But, and a lot of the studios focused on Dota, obviously, but also it seems like a huge amount of Valve employees are actually focused on VR as well. So it seems like just a natural crossover to test out technology. And if it's good enough, you might as well ship it if it's there and that people are using it internally, and it's
this is also, and the International is Valve's flagship event of the year now. Like, that's the thing. That's their biggest public outing as a kind of entertainment company, really. So I guess it makes sense to launch something like this for it.
It's really exciting. I mean, I'd love to have something like that for StarCraft, where it seems like for me at least, as a total MOBA noob, like, StarCraft is far more readable to me in terms of just units clashing and things dying and, you know, being able to see their upgrades on the units. I can imagine that idea translating onto different types of competition in games really, really, really nicely. Like FIFA. I'd love to watch a game of FIFA from the stands, or just kind of towering over the players and stomping on them.
Or from the sidelines, maybe.
Yeah.
To be a linesman.
Yeah,
or
yeah.
a referee's assistant.
It's interesting because
that'd be awesome.
Because like, for the last couple of years, they've sort of opened the International with, like, source filmmaker recreations of big plays from previous years, which is them kind of, again, going in at the ground level and kind of recreating the spirit of a moment, if not the exact detail.
Yeah, I love
which
those.
is a good way of communicating that idea.
Those are really nice.
And this is a very Valve thing to do. This feels like it supplants it in a way. Because if you want to go and see what something looks like from the ground, obviously it doesn't look spectacular as a really hand-drawn, hand-animated sequence. But, you know, like, I'm considering doing, when this international is wrapped up, presuming you can load the replays after the fact, here are the biggest moments from the international 2016 from the ground. Like, here is what it looked like if you were standing next to the $8 million ice blast, or whatever it's going to be this year. Like, it's crazy, but I'm starting to feel really confident about Viana.
I think it's one of those things where, for me, the biggest thing was the seeing other people, as in, it's an amazing space to be inside and really interesting, and it properly envelops you. And that might sound like a stupid thing to say, because obviously it does, but, it's such a different way of seeing or way of experiencing a thing than a screen where you can sort of see other things in your peripheral vision. But I would say that, because of some of my, screenshot projects, I'm quite used to sort of getting the free camera up and going right down onto the board and like seeing those fights in that perspective. It was more that it was 3D and like other people were there. That was the sort of super exciting thing to me, because otherwise it was kind of like, this is just what I do. This is just me on an average, Tuesday going, oh, yes, well, like this is what Enigma's black hole looks like really, really close up, or, whatever else.
Do those effects hold up? Because they're obviously designed to be viewed from an elevated angle.
They do actually, yeah. Actually, I was impressed
I ducked out of the way of, I had that moment that you had with,
Morphling.
Yeah, Morphling with, Storm Spirit, because he suddenly ran towards me, and I was like, whoa, okay.
Yeah, I mean, the models are very detailed. Like, Dota is obviously played from an isometric perspective, but it's the Source 2 engine now, and the models are as detailed as, more so than Team Fortress or something like that. They're just smaller. So it does hold up. Like, Fog of War looks weird from the ground.
Right.
Like, it looks like it's got terrible draw distance, and it's because it's replicating the Fog of War.
Yeah.
Which means that you can't really see very far. Maybe there's a way of changing that, but yeah, it's, just such a mad thing. Like, I can't wait to play with it more. I'm gonna, after we record this, I'm gonna try and watch an entire match from the ground. Like a war reporter.
Fantastic.
Just following people around.
I really want to see, the servers just wouldn't hold up enough for me to do this when I was playing with it. But I really, really want to watch an ancient fall just from right next to it, peering into the abyss, like the lava pit of like...
If the dire ancient dies, yeah.
Oh yeah. What does Roshan look like? He must be huge.
So I went in and checked him out, but he'd kind of glitched out to be like maybe 6 feet off the ground in terms of my scale to him. So I just walked underneath him and looked up for a while. But you could also sort of get to the point where you were standing there looking directly at him and he was looking directly at you, in quote marks, because whatever. But yeah, so that was pretty cool. And I took the opportunity to look at the animals and stuff. And when you actually are selecting whether you want to go into hero view or this spectator mode or, all of that kind of stuff, the environment that you're standing in is also interactive to a degree. And so I chased a squirrel for a good old time there. That was interesting. And then I nearly fell over because I thought the squirrel was going to walk into me. It was a whole thing. But yeah.
That's so awesome that it's just so granular, like so kind of so much attention to detail on those maps, and that exists in VR as well. You're still able to.
Yeah, it's bonkers. We should probably show you after so that you can just go,
whoa. I still got a vibe at home. I think I might watch some international over the weekend and build up some replays and try this out. It sounds fucking amazing.
I wish they were a company that felt any compulsion to release stats on how this stuff does, though. Like how many people were in a particular bit of the map. Like, can you heat map the people as they mill around,
Yeah.
That kind of stuff. I'd love to see those sort of stats, or like have the ability to create like a little GIF like you can in Tilt Brush of like, an event, like make this a 3-second thing.
That'd be sweet.
Shall we do questions from questions?
Let's. Yeah. It's going to be quite a short questions from questions this week, as, for one thing, Chris, forgot to ask on Twitter for questions, because I'm a big big lazy dickhead, but also because we receive an increasing number of questions for Tom Francis, who isn't here. I star the emails so that we can return to the big list of questions for Tom Francis, which also includes questions about maths none of the rest of us understand that should be answered by Tom Francis, when he gets back. So apologies if you sent something in for him. We've received it. It's just, we are short a Tom.
I should clarify it's more about maths in relation to game design rather than us being
Pip is an
competent
expert mathematician.
Oh no, I mean just like we can do adding.
We can totally do plussing and minusing.
Sometimes even BODMAS.
What's that?
Brackets, operations, division, multiplication, addition, and subtraction. It's the order in which you approach. Okay.
We don't need Tom Francis. We can just fucking get through these questions.
But let's not, because we can't.
I think anyway. Okay.
Yes. What were we talking about?
Notwithstanding.
How's your nose, Pip?
I'm a lot better now.
A little break?
Just, yeah.
Do you want to dwell on it a bit more?
No, not really. Although the wine has a fantastic nose on it.
Hey, let's leave forever. Okay, so, Kingsley writes, Dear virtual reality crates and regular reality crowbars. And this question sort of spins out of something we were just talking about, so, maybe it's extension of the previous discussion. In a very early episode of the pod, Chris and Marsh described how playing Half-Life 2 with a keyboard and mouse was their best experience of VR. Back when the Oculus was first announced, it seemed to be assumed that it would be used as a new way to interface with existing types of games. However, since the Vive appeared on the scene, most of the media coverage has centered around bespoke VR experiences and games where the player is naturally stationary. My question is, have any of you tried to use the release versions of the Oculus or the Vive to play more traditional styles of game? And do you think the technology will eventually become part of regular gaming or evolve into a different platform with its own sets of genres and mechanics in a similar way to mobile gaming? Thanks for reading, Kingsley.
My feeling with VR, and it's what I've sort of always said about it, is that it'll probably end up the way of connecting, that the most interesting things happening with it they might inform gaming, but they might not specifically be game related. And so I largely stick by that, but I would say that that from what I've seen, the most successful or interesting or things that have felt nicest to be in have been experiences that are crafted specifically for VR rather than just taking an existing game and kind of trying to port it over. It's more about sort of reimagining things and trying to solve problems that didn't exist before but have now come up because VR isn't a straight, port over the thing.
I agree with the comparison to mobile gaming, but for a slightly different reason. Rather than seeing it as like one of two things, I think there's actually a continuum. And on one end, you have, to use mobile gaming example, at one end you have games that really could only survive as mobile games, things like Fruit Ninja or whatever, where the tactile element is important, but they're also throwaway to the extent that you probably wouldn't sit and play them at a desktop.
Yeah.
And then at the far end, you have, things that can only exist as traditional PC games. Maybe StarCraft is a good example of that or something like that. But then actually you have a tremendous amount of crossover between the two. Games that, you don't think necessarily would work on PC coming from mobile, but do, and vice versa. And things like Banner Saga, which straddles both, is like a story game for your iPad and also an RPG and, a combat game for your PC, and they're the same thing, and they work. I think the same is true of VR. I think there are a lot of experiences that only work because they are virtual reality. Like a lot of the kind of the more experiential stuff, like looking at a big whale and what if you were on the side of a mountain? Things you could do with the PC, but it would be underwhelming relative to the scale of the effect when they're done in virtual reality. And at the other extreme end, you have things that are going to be really hard to do in VR and you probably shouldn't try. Again, StarCraft is a good example because of everything from perspective to complexity to everything else. However, I think there are loads of experiences that kind of work either way. And the question becomes, to what extent can you realize both of those experiences within one game where maybe using VR is optional? And to what extent do you have to make a decision about which of the games you're going to make? And I think, Raw Data is a good example of this, because they could have made a good action shooter game with a cyberpunk setting, and it would probably sink into the mass of other wave survival action games. It could be very good, but it would be hard to make a name for itself. They've made a VR game, which, it's an FPS. It's just that the FP is completely different to any other first person you've ever been in the game. But the concept itself, there's no reason it couldn't transfer. And similarly, like there are loads of games that, what was the cooperative spaceship adventure game we went on with?
Artemis Bridge Simulator?
It wasn't Artemis. Artemis Bridge Simulator is like it, but this is the other one. Polaris?
Oh, the one that we
Pulsar?
played with Brendy?
Yeah.
Oh, I can't remember.
Begins with a P. Anyway.
Yes.
Something like that, which is currently designed as a first-person game where everyone's manning the crew on a kind of Enterprise-style ship. With some adjustments, that could make for a spectacular VR game, particularly as people are getting more comfortable making multiplayer things happen within VR. And I feel like that's the state of things as they are now. It's not necessarily that VR will become a completely siloed industry, but more that, there's quite a lot of crossover, and as game designers are approaching an idea, can this or would this work as a VR game and also meet all the needs, things we need to make, things we need it to do and so on in terms of success, is an interesting decision that I think will probably confront people more and more as VR becomes more common.
I think it's also, it's going to be a matter of perspective as people get more used to those experiences, because I went to a VR showcase while I was out at GDC earlier in the year, and there were some games that were so clearly designed to be VR experiences from the ground up, and there were others that just felt like, well, I get it, and there are VR elements to this, but I don't get why this is VR. Like, it could be anything. And, I think at that point, and as part of a showcase, and before the Rift had even been released at that point, you'd look at that stuff in a showcase and go, but this isn't showing me anything about the power of VR. It's not showing me anything about an experience that I couldn't just have on a regular flat screen and just sort of play it pretty much the exact same way. And so that was kind of interesting, because I imagine that if I were to go to another event like that in a year's time, I'd be looking for completely different things, or not completely different, but it wouldn't be quite in the same way as this is a showcase for what VR can be and what it can do and what people are starting to experiment with. So maybe there will be more space for those. I don't really want to say unspectacular, but those not specific to VR experiences then, I guess. But yeah, like I say, the Kinect thing is,
so there are like
large.
Seems like the issues with VR are so severe if you get it wrong that it would always require quite a severe degree of tailoring to actually produce a VR version of anything, almost. And I guess the question is whether that's really going to be worth the development time if the VR element doesn't add anything to the game specifically. And it's easy to see some games like Tabletop Simulator, which is just it should be an automatic VR win, because you actually get to kind of have an avatar and be opposite someone and just mess around with the table. Physics fun. And you can see some really interesting experiments with pen and paper RPG playing in virtual reality environments where you're all kind of present and able to see terrain and stuff. But as far as like just lifting BioShock and putting it into VR, like that's just a huge amount of, you just got to redesign that game. It's just, I think that's not going to happen very often. I don't think you see many games doing that.
That game, The Assembly, that released, I think it was last week, maybe the week before. And I was kind of interested because they'd been harping on about, like, it was designed from the ground up for VR, all of that kind of thing. And so they released it as a kind of tiered payment thing. Like, I think that the non-VR version was the thing, and then you could pay $5 £100 more, and then the VR bit would kind of unlock, if you see what I mean. And I think a lot of people reacted badly to that as a tiered structure. But essentially it was a way of saying, well, you can have the not quite as good experience for cheaper, was more, I think, what they were trying to get at with it. But so I played the non-VR experience because I didn't have a VR headset at the time. And it was like, as far as I could tell, and you could kind of see where the VR bits would kind of come in that you could look at things in the environment and explore the environments a bit. And there was, you know, if you pressed one of the buttons on the keyboard, you could sort of see that it was doing that thing of showing you where your character would move to if you know, used that as your locomotion kind of thing. But I wasn't seeing anything about it that hinted to me that this was a game that needed to be in VR, or that it had particular special consideration beyond, you know, here's the story, which is the story, and have some moral choices, why don't you? But, you know, there are some environments that you can pick around in, and I just, like, and I would totally need to play it in VR and see whether that's a fair assessment. But from playing the non-VR version, I'm just sort of looking at it and going, what do you mean designed from the ground up for VR?
Yeah. Someone's got to pay that cost. Like, we already know from VR mods that it's horrible. Like, just jumping into Skyrim through a VR mod is just bad VR. It's horrible. And you're going to be a lot less ill if you just play it. But so the consumers are going to pay for it, or developers are going to. And why would developers do that unless there were real kind of demonstrable benefits to a certain game using VR features? So it feels to me as though they'll be quite separate in a lot of ways. But we'll see. I hope not.
Yeah, I think maybe the difference, maybe I do still think there's a gradient, but I think maybe there is a hard break somewhere in the middle of it. Like there's degrees of appropriateness and maybe degrees of adaptability when it comes to ideas. Things work in both.
Yeah,
but at some point that investment that needs to be made is probably a barrier.
Yeah. I mean, I can imagine third person games working quite nicely. I think there is a third person kind of colourful jumping platformer that I need to try on the Vive. But I can imagine, I mean, maybe something like Devil May Cry would be too fast and crazy. But, yeah, I don't know. Maybe like VR versions will work for some genres much more easily than they do for others. Like a first-person game is much more difficult.
I think if people like the focus that you get with VR, for example, you know, just the ability to not be continually distracted by second screens or by, you know, sort of ambient noise or whatever else, then there's the big screen stuff, which isn't VR, but it's a use of a VR headset that lets you maybe take advantage of some of the zoning outness that VR can help with. So that might be another way to, I guess, use that technology if you're happy with, you know, the focus, or, you know, like maybe if you've got a kid who is, you know, not saying that if the kid is crying, you would put on your VR headset and ignore it. But what I'm saying is, like, no, I am saying that, but as long as it was okay and, you know, well tended to and things. But I mean, you know, like, but you know what I mean? Like if you actually needed a break from something, or like if your neighbors were drilling, or if, you know, just anything like that, it might actually just be a convenient way of enjoying a thing and not having to quite put up with all of the demands of the rest of life, really.
So experiential stuff like Everybody's Gone to the Rapture, Dear Esther, those kind of, like, a space to be in. Whereas most of the point of the game is just being in the space, and that's
I think something that could be interesting, actually, is if you could curate that space a bit better. So instead of it just being like I really can't remember whether it was just a screen or whether you could, like, do anything else with it. I'd need to go back in and check. But, you know, if you could kind of, like, set the surroundings so it wasn't such a stark sort of black versus bright screen thing, you know, like if you could curate the space, or maybe add in a bit of extra sort of ambient noise if you needed, like white noise, or, you know, that kind of thing. That could be interesting.
Noise blocking kind of.
Yeah.
Quick one, this, because you can't answer it because he's not here, but it's funny. Dear all, is it true that Tom F. has a J.C. Denton sex doll in his house, as Jordan Thomas alleged? on the My Favorite Game podcast. Best regards, James. That would be, legendary level designer, creator of Thief 3's The Cradle and Fort Frolic.
Yeah.
In BioShock and recently Magic Circle, alleging that Tom Francis sleeps with a blow-up doll of Deus Ex protagonist JC Denton.
Well, it might be one of those sex pillows.
Indeed. To which we can only say, maybe.
Who knows? If only there was some way to find out. If only we knew the man in question.
I know.
Ask him.
He's in Sweden though.
He's in Sweden. Beyond
So
any mortal's reach.
So unless he forgot to take JC with him and break into his house, then there's no real determining that.
But we'll put
He
this
might
to
get
him when he gets
stopped
back.
with JC at customs. Like, you know, in his suitcase. Stuffed in there.
JC just, he wouldn't be in the suitcase, you'd find it deflated in a vent somewhere, still wearing its shades.
Like one rubbery hand,
Just
like
flopping out.
extended from the, from the grate.
That was a really stupid joke.
So no, we can't comment one way or the other.
Excellent. Well, that's resolved.
Yeah, I know.
Without ambiguity.
We can't comment one way or the other.
But we can help spread the rumour.
Indeed, why not? Okay. Daniel writes, Dear Tim and Daisy, last week Chris used the phrase skip to the end, which I presume was a direct quote from Spaced, he presumes correctly. A quote which I still use regularly even though the first episode of Spaced aired 17 years ago.
Fuck!
Pause for the passage of time.
Oh.
Spaced depicted people playing actual games properly. What's either your favourite or most loathed depiction of gaming on TV or film? Cheers, Daniel. Spaced, if you aren't aware of it, was a brilliant cult British sitcom from apparently 17 years ago.
Why do you keep repeating that? Why would you do that?
I don't know. Let's all fall down the time tunnel, Pip. The bottom lies death. Which was about, I guess, nerds and their lives, before that became, passé and awful. You know.
Before the Big Bang Theory.
Yeah, before the Big Bang Theory. Before the dark
Well-meaning,
times.
quite sweet misfits bumbling along.
Yeah.
20-somethings kind of, post-education, not...
Yeah, I guess
trying to find
nerds
their
aren't
way.
really the theme so much as kind of like 20-somethings.
Yeah, lost 20-somethings.
Lost 20-somethings. But not the Big Bang Theory.
Smoking pot and playing Resident Evil 2 on a beanbag.
So, video games.
So Space does it really well. My standout bad example of this is Veronica Mars, the first season of Veronica Mars, which is a show that is, I think, beloved by people who probably also like things like Spaced and games and so on. You know, another cult, TV series. But the episode where she investigates like hackers who are involved in a gaming cafe is probably the worst. And I'm not sure if it's trying to be stylized, but she dresses up as like a Japanese schoolgirl so that she can pass unnoticed at the gaming cafe, which is entirely like pitch black and neon. And and the way they talk to each other, and it's like if your dad wrote Neuromancer. It's awful.
Have we talked about this before?
We might have
Because
done.
I think I've definitely told the thing about The Good Wife.
Yes, no, we have spoken about that
Before.
recently.
God, are you talking about the one with the fake terrorist game?
Is it that? No, it's the, because I had to do a break for spoilers, so we should talk about this after.
There's a
pod.
really, really bad Good
yeah.
Wife episode about a video game that,
Oh no, it's not that one.
Okay.
It's, yes, no, we can talk, but only
Right.
if you've watched fully up to where Netflix is.
okay, I have not.
In that case, you come back to me when you have caught up.
Jump out the window and
And then we can just hang our heads and,
Alright.
and just go
God,
along.
it gets worse. That was I was going to mention that as the worst
Yeah.
example. And if there's a worse example, then
In the same show.
shit.
Yeah.
An otherwise very well researched show about lore. And...
Oh,
amazing,
because I
isn't it?
think, yeah, because we also, at that point, we spoke about the ham-fisted product placement in House of Cards at various points.
Oh, the PSP stuff, yeah.
Yeah, he loves his Vita, does Kevin Spacey.
Spike Lee, has some awful kind of stuff like in his films about video games where like a character will come across a kid who's playing a game and it will do one of those dreadful kind of fake game sequences, which has clearly just been mocked up in like a 3D editor, and it'll be some sort of faux GTA thing. And the character will say, "Hey, why are you playing that, man? It'll turn you into a serial killer." And the kid's like, "Well, I like it." But he's like, "Well, stop killing people on that and go and live your life, son." And pat on the back and then sends him on. Just the most awful patronising shit that has no idea about games or what, what they're actually like. That's the default, isn't it?
I just,
that's the default presentation of games.
And there's quite a lot of it in syndicated US dramas and things. I think there's an episode of House where...
Oh yeah, that's terrible.
It's so bad. Like, I really can't remember specific, examples of dialogue because it's been such a long time since I watched it. And I think it was one of the later series and I've tried to block them out. But, it's they seem to have defaulted to this awful... there's a weird tranche of non-existent video game-ness that they all seem to draw on. That is just that it's full of people with strange eye makeup going, "We need to jack in now," and you're just like, what? Like, who have you been talking to? What even is this? And people sort of typing really fast and going, "Oh, but you couldn't possibly understand." And I'm just like, have you been to an indie hub? What the hell are you doing?
There's nice people with, sipping tea.
I think my favourite thing, did I mention this before as well? There's a version of CSI, but it's CSI
Cyber.
Yeah, Cyber. And that was just amazing, but it's in the way that is not good. But they're just sort of explaining hacking as they go and, all kinds of technical terminology. But, I'm sort of struggling to come up with things that were good. I think there were things that I thought were amazing when I was a kid, like things like the Krypton Factor, where you had to land a plane, and it just used a really basic flight sim. But to me, that was the most exciting thing.
I remember that well. Really cool.
Something that's also bad, but for different reasons, is Wreck-It Ralph, which is a film that is about games and it is trying to be Toy Story, but for game characters, or Monsters Inc., but for game characters, or for anything else. But like you were saying earlier, actually, I think it's a DreamWorks film, not Pixar, or one of them, but, it's so formulaic within that structure of sort of nostalgic characters from a different thing actually have deep internal lives, but then, and so, car chase, caper, and so on, that it doesn't really hold up, because it's kind of barely about games. It's such a missed opportunity, because if you watch the trailers and stuff, there seems to be loads of potential, because Zangief and Captain Buffalo I think are in it at one point. And, there's some Mario references and things, and it looks like it's going to be fun. And obviously the titular character is kind of a made up arcade game character. And they almost kind of commit to that, and it does all the same things that those movies do, about showing you the kind of hub world where they all live and so on. And, one of the characters is a space marine captain from a much more violent game who's quite a lot like Female Shepherd. And there's lots of potentially good jokes there. But then the entire back half of the film settles for being set in the same kind of Candyland Mario Kart thing. At which point it might as well be a film about candy that race cars, because that's in any other context. And it seems so that was crap. For that reason. Basically, it's impossible to do well, apparently. I kind of wonder about this. I wonder if other media did this to their successes in some ways. When cinema came around, are there loads of really shit descriptions of cinema in books? Is there a bit then Margaret went to the cinema. It was just 4 hours of shouting.
I think they try and pretend it doesn't really exist. For the most part.
I suppose so, but no, I can't really think of it. You know what I mean? When the novel came along, were there suddenly loads of poems about where people were reading really shit novels? I don't know.
So long, it
didn't rhyme.
Your life. Where are the rhymes?
Hang on, I think that we haven't taken a moment to acknowledge that recently Pixels.
Oh God,
fuck,
I forgot about that.
Yeah.
You know, that's a game where someone actually, like, basically bones Qubit.
What?
Like, as far as I can tell, like, that film has a lot of problems. Like,
Because I only saw the trailer,
so,
and I think you were looking at me because I was doing swearing loudly at the cinema in front of people. So
yeah, I mean, it looks like an appalling pile of shite, but I think, as far as I know, this is second-hand information, but, one of the plot beats in it is that, one of the video game characters that comes to Earth from space is like the lady from Gauntlet, like the kind of barbarian warrior lady, ninja assassin person that one of the characters is in love with for some reason. But rather than come to Earth as a big CGI character like the rest of the video game characters do, she comes to Earth as an actual human woman who's all like, you know, scantily clad and whatever. And I can't remember exactly how this works. I think she dies, but Qbert, as in the actual arcade character Qbert, turns into her and then gets married to one of the other characters in the film. And then at the end, they have lots of little Qbert babies.
you know that this is starting to sound fever dreamish on the scale of the
Street Fighter
Street Fighter.
No,
script.
I might be wrong about this, and I haven't seen the film. I'm relying on Tyler's write-up of it for PC Gamer, but I am 90% sure that Pixels is a film where someone fucks Qbert.
Oh my god.
Wow.
Can I just say, I am absolutely devastated that Sam Roberts isn't here to say that Video Games by Lana Del Rey is the least accurate portrayal of working in the video games industry. So shout out
don't know what
to
you're talking
Sam,
about.
like, you know, salute.
Everyone
to
I know
him.
in this industry lives in this sort of sun-drenched 80s vision of LA and has perfect smoky eyes.
And says, jacking in!
I think it's, I always said something really bad. I think it's time for us to stop
Yes.
the podcast now.
Oh.
I almost said, I think it's time for us to jack, and then the opposite of thing you said, but that's not what I meant at all. So I'm going to unsay it by not saying it at all. Don't even think about it, Pip.
Jacking up.
Close enough. If you'd like to send us a question, which we'll totally read, you can do so by emailing us questions@crateandcrowbar.com. You can leave a question on the forum at crateandcrowbar.com/forum. You can tweet us at crateandcrowbar. If you'd like to discuss the episode, you can do so on the forum or on Discord, which we will present a link for in the show notes and as well as on the website, perhaps, and the sidebar, why not? You can also catch us on YouTube, but, you know, there's not much new there, to be honest, so don't know why I brought it up. And
Do we have a Flickr?
no. Why not
A Bebo?
add us to your network on LinkedIn?
Oh god. Don't.
Don't. Check us out on Google+. Also don't. If you'd like to follow us as individuals, you can do so. My name on Twitter is C Thurston, that's CTHURSTEN, Tom.
I'm at PCG Ludo, which is LEDO.
I am at Philippa War, which is at... Hang on.
There we go.
Every time.
No, I was trying to do it without, like, using my fingers, so I was, like, holding them really, like, tightly, and then I realised that I'd said at instead of P, and then it had all gone wrong without even meaning to. So, anyway, at Philippa War, which is at PHILIPPAWARR.
Spectacular. I'm going to go climb inside Dota and watch team fights from a hedge.
I want to sit in a beanbag and play Resident Evil 2, like Tim from Spaced.
I'm going to enjoy the Bakewell tart I made.
And drink the rest of your weirdly red
No, it betrayed me.
white wine. It's gone bright red. It's
going
absorbed
through a
the
sieve.
raspberry essence.
I don't trust it.
The important thing is we all survived.
Yes.
Thanks for listening, everybody.
Thanks for listening.